everybody. We have with us a really distinguished and international panel. Luxembourg, New York, Brussels, Milano. And our theme today is to discuss, will renewable, cleaner energies be able to match the hydrocarbons dominance? That is the main theme of our panel. I would just like to highlight that for those of you who are listening here and want to listen to it in Portuguese, there is simultaneous translation. And for those who would like to pose questions, please use the Q&A and we will address them at the end of our discussion. I would like to begin with asking all of you for a comment, a general comment on the issue, may cleaner batteries as well as new or better energy solutions in the fields of solar, wind, sea wave, hydros, nuclear, hydrogen or other offer timing, and I would like to emphasize timing alternatives to the burning of fossil fuels. So who would like to begin, please?
Ok. Bom, como estou em Portugal, vou falar em português. E, bom, responder esta pergunta e fazer previsão, e como dizia não sei quem, a arte da previsão é uma arte difícil, sobretudo quando se trata de prever o futuro. Então, sendo isto dito, eu penso que esta questão, globalmente, uma resposta rápida seria dizer que estou confiante que estas soluções tecnológicas vão chegar, tanto que elas já estão tecnologicamente prontas, que é só uma questão em relação ao futuro, uma questão de rapidez de desenvolvimento. Também em relação ao atemperamento, eu penso que lá estamos em situações um pouco diferentes em relação às alternativas apresentadas, porque se olhamos o que se passou nos 20 últimos anos, temos diferenças claras. Por exemplo, enquanto as renováveis tiveram um acréscimo espetacular nos últimos 20 anos, eu quero lembrar que nos últimos 20 anos, mais ou menos, a produção nova a partir de energias renováveis, incluindo hídrica, porque a hídrica é renovável, ultrapassa os 3.000 terawatt-hora ano. Quer dizer que dos 10.000 terawatt-hora ano de consumo, de aumento de consumo que tivemos entre 2000 e 2020, 30% veio das renováveis. Enquanto, por exemplo, relativamente ao nuclear, o nuclear não aumentou a sua produção entre 2000 e 2020. Por isso, em termos de atemperamento, sobretudo quando tomamos em conta a idade do parque nuclear, em média, os reatores têm mais de 30 anos no mundo, penso que, em termos dos prazos que consideramos, nomeadamente 2050, a participação maior virá das renováveis, mas não só, virá da combinação das renováveis com eficiência energética. E, nomeadamente, a ligação que há, para acabar, entre eficiência energética e renováveis, no sentido que a eficiência energética, nomeadamente através dos smart grids, permitirá ainda mais esta penetração das renováveis.
Obrigada, Henri. Quem segue?
Hi. So, I think for electricity, I definitely feel like the cleaner energies will already is already starting to show the matching of the hydrocarbon, dominance in replacing fossil fuels. So, I think 3 reasons around the electricity side. One, we already have markets today where renewables is the largest source of electricity. So UK, Ireland, Spain, Portugal, Germany, Denmark, CAISO, Brazil, those are all markets where renewables make up the largest share of the electricity generation source. we do have already moments where we're managing at 100% electricity. So just last week, Ireland hit 82%. Denmark was 100%. 2 days last week, Germany was over 70%. So we have moments where the renewable share can be really high, and we are managing longer durations of those moments. I think, secondly, we are seeing the money flow to cleaner energies. So I think, as per the IEA Energy Investment Report, fossil is still ahead in absolute numbers in terms of something like 800 billion, and then the clean energy space is something like 750. But the growth has certainly been in the clean energy space, and that crossover will probably happen in the next couple of years, because the investment in fossil has been declining while the investment in clean energies has been growing. And then we do see electrification being a larger share of the energy mix. So from the 20% or so it is today to something like at least 50%, and some scenarios even go up as high as 70%. So for the electricity side, I think I'm pretty confident that it'll replace the fossil fuel dominance, but not everything can be electrified. And I guess that's a huge but. There are like a lot of hard to abate sectors. There's aviation, there's marine, there's cement, there's steel. There's a lot of things that we're going to struggle to electrify. And in those cases, I think we have a lot of work to do to be competitive with fossil. There is a lot of initiatives and targets to reduce that cost of hydrogen. The US, where I'm sitting now, the DOE hydrogen shot is $1 for 1 kilogram in 1 decade, but there's still a lot of work to do. And by 2030, calling on what Henri was mentioning in terms of how long it takes, by 2030, we need those other solutions to be where wind and solar is today. So like in 10 years, we need to be in a situation where we can really scale hydrogen in the 2030s. And I think we still have a lot of work to do for that to happen.
Thank you, Melissa. Now to Paula, please.
Perhaps to complement to previous speakers, and here I speak more from an EU, more institutional perspective. So I'd like to just to remind that the EU member states have endorsed the European Green Deal. This is a strategy, a growth strategy that aims to turn European Union the first continent to achieve carbon neutrality by 2050, and through a series of proposals, legal proposals made last year, the Commission has put forward an approach to get to minus 55% of greenhouse gases by 2030. And getting there, entails a number of important steps reflected in this legislative package, which is, first of all, energy efficiency. This is the first thing we have to look at to exhaust all the possibilities there. Secondly, electrification with renewables. Thirdly, for those consumption tests, as Melissa referred, so these sectors hard to abate where, electrification may not be the most cost-effective and immediate solution, then to let the conditions for renewables and low-carbon gases to come up, including hydrogen. Of course, on these, we also have to add all the work necessary to put the infrastructure up to speed, including with digitalization. So the European Green Deal has come also with an important target for renewables, 40% by 2030. This is quite a challenge for several member states. That we have different starting points. But this the overall, let's say, package points to that, and our analysis established that this is cost-effective to reach 40% renewable energy by 2030. Allow me just two very brief points. Next to legislation, of course, we have also a number of support programs for innovation and technology, but also for recovery. And as you may know, the recovery facilities, so to help member states overcome the economic crisis due to COVID, was anchored on two main priorities: digital and energy transition. So there is an important support there to accelerate reforms and investments towards renewables. So member states have important opportunities there. And the last and third point I'd like to make is that this European Green Deal so responds to the climate imperatives, aims at decarbonizing our economy, but also, and as we see now today more perhaps than in the past, is also a way to increase affordability and increase our supply security, which is very much in the focus nowadays. Thank you.
Thank you, Paula. Xavier, please.
Thank you for the organization, first, inviting me, and also to the distinguished panelists for the discussion. So let me try to build on what the previous colleagues said on the topic. So I think that of course, there's no doubt that electrification and renewables, so together, will play a crucial role on decarbonizing not just the energy sector, but in general the economy. I think that there are at least a couple of more themes to consider, and been touched also those themes before. One is, of course, the energy efficiency. So that's for sure one of the levers that we think it's relevant to reduce the overall consumptions of energy that will help the reduction of the CO2 and then the emissions in general. But there is also a couple of other elements to mention. One is the role of the other sectors, who are not, easy to electrify, 50-60% in 2050. That's the kind of numbers that we have in mind. The rest, if you're not tackling that, that will remain, the same as today. So that's the need for pushing there, and that's the role that we see for hydrogen or the derivatives of hydrogen or green gases or other kind of molecules that will play a role there. There is a clear role for infrastructure in that play, because you need to interlink all the different elements. We cannot build on silos the solution. So the solution needs to be interlinked with the different solutions. And you need to find a way that this is efficient. So we are not wasting, in transformation, all that part. The third element is, of course, storage. We see more and more relevancy, of storage, not just, for today reasons linked to the gas business, but more in general in the future. Also, when we need to store renewables, we need to find a way to store it for longer term than what we can do today, for example, for batteries. So there are different elements, together with electrification and renewables, and we need to play together. And that's the complexity, is making all the system work in a way that is efficient to look into a solution which is achievable by the planet.
Thank you all for your inputs. I still have one question. Well, I have loads of them, but there's one that is particular, which is, do you think on the mix of renewable energies, the investment in infrastructure, and the development of energy efficiency, are you comfortable, are you optimistic that we will reach zero carbon net emissions by 2050, as the European Union would like to, or 2060, as some of major polluting countries have committed to in COP26? Are we comfortable with those dates, or are we still far from reaching net zero emission by mid-century? Thank you.
Of course, the European Union has signed up. It is enshrined in law, the 55% greenhouse gas reduction for 2030, and this is what will lead us to carbon neutrality by 2050. So our analysis point us to that in the European Union. And if I may even add, I would think that the current situation where we are with high and volatile energy prices and gas supply security issues, I think that they will even encourage governments to anticipate or to accelerate decarbonization and to tap more into the potential for renewables across the European Union. I think this is what is coming out from discussions, and I think it's inevitable that what's going on nowadays with prices and supply security concerns will lead to a much stronger, I guess, commitment from governments, but also from all the actors, including companies, to go towards that.
penso que é possível e que a questão não é tanto uma questão tecnológica, porque as tecnologias estão ou vão ser prontas. A única coisa que me preocupa um pouco é as barreiras que não são barreiras tecnológicas, nem tanto barreiras econômicas, mas que têm a ver com a economia, que é a questão da regulamentação. Eu penso que para atingir os objetivos para 2050, particularmente na União Europeia, que eu conheço melhor, é preciso algumas mudanças do fundo em termos de regulamentação, nomeadamente porque falamos muito de eletricidade, mas não esqueço o resto. Me parece que a forma como funciona o mercado da eletricidade em Portugal neste momento, não, em Portugal, na União Europeia, não é ajustada com o que queremos atingir, nomeadamente a forma de formação dos preços da energia no mercado da energia, que deriva da regulamentação europeia, me parece totalmente inadaptada e conduz a que temos dos preços da energia racional para o preço. Ano passado, em fevereiro, desceu no mercado a 28 euros por megawatt-hora e está, estes últimos tempos, à volta de 200 ou mais euros por megawatt-hora. Não há racionalidade nisso e isto tem a ver essencialmente com a forma como está feito este mercado elétrico europeu. E isto, para mim, é assustador para os investidores, que não têm visibilidade em relação a investimentos. Tem que haver, no meu entender, uma reflexão de fundo na questão da reorganização da formação dos preços no mercado elétrico na Europa.
Maybe building on Henri's point on the electricity markets, I think there is a lot that we have to see in 2030 to be confident about 2050. So, I mean, electricity has to be the backbone of this future energy system, this future integrated energy system that Xavier mentioned. And we know that if renewables is going to be the dominant form, then they have to do the job that a lot of natural gases or hydro is doing today. So they need to be able to provide reliability, resiliency, flexibility services. We are seeing that change in the markets, but renewables, batteries, demand response, they have to be able to do that job. We need systems that are much more digital, the inertia changes, the power market reform that Henri mentioned. We've got a lot of work to do to make renewables like the grown-up renewable, like the main energy source. And we have to see that happening in the 2030s and really owning that role and seeing that sustained ability to sustain 100% variable when it's available and long-term storage when it's not, to be able to be confident that within, let's say, a net zero electric or a close to net zero electricity system in the 2030s, we can then get to a 2050. So, so I do still think there is quite a lot of work to do operationally to do that transformation. I think we can do it. Like, I'm optimistic that we can do it, but I sit on the National Grid ESO Technology Advisory Council, and we have a target that in 2025, we have no limit on wind and solar. So when it's 100% renewable, we can take it and we can run with it, like Denmark does already, and Portugal, I think, does as well. Then 2035 net zero electricity, and then 2050. So those interim targets are really, really important because there's quite a lot to do operationally to make sure that our systems are transforming.
Yeah, I do agree. I mean, there's a sense of positivism. I mean, in our view, I mean, we built. Since few years, I built the scenarios for in Snam for Italy, but we also look at Europe in general. And we target 2050 at net zero. So it's not that we are testing it. We target it, and we see there is options out there. No, so it's not just one scenario. There's multiple scenarios you can draft for getting to net zero. The question is how sustainable those scenarios are. Sustainable from a technical point of view, of course, but also the economic standpoint. No, so if which of the scenario is the one that will be most economically viable, and I think that Europe, of course, is a bit leading the race to net zero. Of course, this needs to be also looked from a more global eye. So we need to think of what the others big geographies are doing, and finding a way also to make that collaborative, and having one approach. But I think that the from the technical point of view, solutions are there, more solution will come. I mean, we're always doing it considering what we have today. You know? We're not thinking about other alternative technologies, but those will develop for sure. So, I mean, and we will find new spaces for solution for sure.
I would perhaps like to go a bit back to the very concept of renewable. I mean, what is for you renewable energies? Does this include nuclear energy, for instance? Can we define renewable energies as energies who are not, which do not have hydrocarbons within it? From an operational point of view, how would you define renewable energies? And secondly, we talk about cleaner energies, but there are also some downsides to some of these clean energies. For instance, when we speak about wind turbines, wind generated energy, we tend to see at, for instance, the role of the rare earths, and the geopolitics changes completely in this equation. So my question, and for all of us and for all of those who are listening to us, would be a more conceptual question. What would you consider, in your opinion, renewable, and if you make any distinction between them? And cleaner energies does not imply, of course, 100% clean energy, and I think that's also a challenge of communication that is quite important. And I would like to hear your comments. Thank you.
Penso que as palavras são importantes. Renovável é renovável. Por isso, mesmo se há os renováveis tipo eólica, o vento, o solar, enfin, eólico, solar, etc., em termos de fluxo, ou algumas renováveis que, como a biomassa ou com a geotermia a alta temperatura, que são consideradas como renováveis, mas em função do uso que se faz, o caractere renovável não é absoluto. Mas em relação ao nuclear, para mim não há discussão. Não é uma fonte de energia renovável. Não emite, ou emite pouco CO2, mas não é renovável, porque atrás uma matéria-prima que é o urânio, e o urânio, por definição, não é renovável. Por isso, penso que esta questão de denominação do que é renovável, penso que é melhor ficar com deixar as palavras no seu sentido original. Em relação à questão ambiental, isto é um pouco diferente. Embora eu pense que é uma discussão com foi falado na sessão anterior sobre a última taxonomia que foi proposta pela Comissão Europeia, mas eu quero lembrar que ainda ela tem que ser aprovada ao nível do Parlamento Europeu, quer dizer, neste momento é uma proposta da Comissão, não é ainda uma coisa que se aplique. Há um largo debate sobre isso e acho que não é o objetivo de falar deste debate. Mas então, para assim, repito, renovável é renovável. Não há discussão para mim sobre este assunto.
Also jumping here, I mean, the renewables are well defined in the Renewable Energy Directive, and there you just see those described by Henri Baguenier. Nuclear energy is not part of the Renewable Energy Directive. As in relation to, let's say, other environmental impacts of those clean energies, including renewable energy, of course, they have to be taken into account. This is why, for instance, when it comes to biomass, we have established a very strict criteria for bioenergy, both for the liquids, but also we have also introduced for the forest biomass. So in order to so that the whole, let's say, life cycle the environmental impacts and the impacts on biodiversity and land and so on are perfectly taken into account. Allow me just one precision as regards taxonomy. So it was indeed is a complementary delegated act, and has this delegated act, the procedure is the following. Once the Commission tabled a proposal for a delegated act, which is the case, then both the Parliament and the Council have 2 months for scrutiny. So it's also in the hands of the Member States, not only the Parliament.
I mean, I agree, renewable is renewable. As we go through the progress of actually trying to make it happen, though, I do think, you know, when we have an industrial clusters initiative with the World Economic Forum, and we purposely called it towards net zero, and we purposely are open to lower carbon technologies, because there are geographies and applications in areas where 100% renewables, and this is me as the head of renewables, is difficult, and we need to look at a lot of the different geographies and consider what they have. And then to your point on rare earth, for sure, you know, nickel and copper and bauxite and all of those things, we need to be looking at, you know, zero carbon nickel refining and all of the global supply chains for that. That's absolutely really, really important. And we need to be aware of not only the rare earth situation, but also equity and all of that stuff that comes with it. So I think we have to take these holistic views, and we have to be incredibly pragmatic by geography. Accenture are currently part of the B20 Energy, Sustainability and Climate Group. Our CEO for Growth Markets is one of the co-chairs, so I get to sit in on the B20 meetings. And this is because it's hosted by Indonesia. It is really the Growth Markets B20, following on from Francesco Stracci, who chaired it in Italy last year, right? So huge focus on growth markets, and their, you know, equity is huge, right? I mean, these are the coal countries. Indonesia is coal, like indigenous coal, and we're telling them it actually is on one of their plans is reduce coal. It's definitely there, but that comes with a lot of impacts as well, right? So renewable is renewable, and we absolutely have that as the gold standard. We want electrify as much as possible. We want all of this, but we have to do that balancing equitable access and economics. We just have to. So.
Yeah, you said, but basically, I mean, you said everything. I mean, I'm fully aligned with, I mean, the three of you. I mean, I think that no one silver bullet, I mean, can play, I mean, the role in every geography. I think also renewables, you need to find a place where you have the natural resources to use it, no? So I think I mean, you need to also find a way to develop renewables where, I mean, you have more sun, more wind, I mean, and not try to find the same solution for every place. I think, I mean, one element that, I mean, I always like to remember is that we're talking about renewable energies and not renewable electricity. So, I mean, all the biomass, biogas, and I mean, all the other vectors, because, I mean, either a vector is not, I mean, a source. But anyway, I mean, that's the way we need to look at it. And also, I mean, if you're producing somewhere the renewables, I mean, you need to transfer where the renewable is consumed. So you can use also this kind of other vectors for transporting it. So I think that's one of the core elements. But definitely, I mean, the answer is, I mean, renewables are tracked very well by the European Commissions on the paper. So I mean, that's out of question.
Thank you. This is a sort of school exam, but sorry, I have another question to throw to you, which is we had at the end of last week the European Union African Union Summit, and within the many issues linking or combining the two continents, there's a discussion on what sustainable development means. And we all agree that sustainable development means economic growth, social development, and environmental sustainability. But then when we come down to the details of how to link the three, how to link the economic growth of Africa and the social development of Africa with the environmental sustainability, then arguments start to pop up. How do you see the issue of sustainable development including economic growth, social development, and environmental sustainability in developing countries. We may as well get to 2050 in Europe and North America with a net zero emissions goal, but that will mean not that much if other continents are not there as well. So how do we link these things, knowing that at the same time that we are trying to reach net zero emissions by 2050 or 60, we also need to promote and sustain economic growth and social development in developing countries. How do we square this? Thank you.
I think one important metric is this per capita CO2 in developing markets. So sometimes we forget, right? So in Indonesia, it's like per capita CO2 is 1 metric ton per person. In the UK, it's 4 to 5. In the US, it's 14 to 15. So the per capita CO2 in a lot of developing markets is tiny compared to Europe and the US. And that's supposed to grow. Like in the old kind of how we did it is as economies grow, right, energy consumption grows. And of course, we're trying to decouple that. We are absolutely trying to decouple that, right? So energy productivity looks different, but it is a challenge that we can't forget, that in a lot of those markets, energy access is still an issue. And so that per capita CO2, there's got to be room for that to grow. And I think maybe the second point to make on just looking at growth markets is also linking the closure of coal with the growth of renewables and opportunity in industry. So it's really important, like the Europe cases that I love, like Enel and EDP do great, like Sines plant, right? That closed, that's in Portugal. So call out to the Sines group, no jobs lost, right? Really important case study. Tomorrow I'm in a coal to renewables workshop and they will be presenting that to the Indonesia, India, and South Africas of this world of how they closed a coal plant and nobody lost their job. So I think it's really important that like you put the closure of coal with the creation of new industry, solar growth, battery manufacturing, metals like nickel refining, like that it's not only about closing coal, because who wants to invest in something that's just negative, right? It's got to be the closing of coal with the creation of new jobs and new industry. And that's how we need to be positioning it to growth markets. So I think just that context is helpful when thinking about, the energy transition in growth markets.
I can also add one additional element here. So, for example, when you talk about Europe, we cannot see Europe as just an island from an energy perspective. So we are connected with neighbors. And for example, Italy is a natural bridge to North Africa. So today we are importing natural gas and also other elements, but in particular natural gas. In the future, we are thinking how to import, for example, hydrogen produced in North Africa. So there's also a way, as I said before, to produce renewables where they are and then transport them. I think that's one of the elements. There's many examples of additional projects like that one also in Morocco or Egypt or other countries where you can produce efficiently the energy there, and then you convey the energy where the consumption is. So I think that these are elements that can also help the development of local economies and promote an international growth for renewables, and not just in a specific point, a specific region.
Eu concordo totalmente com o que foi dito pelos dois precedentes oradores. Acrescentarei que, na minha visão, até a transição energética é uma oportunidade e não um obstáculo para os países em desenvolvimento e particularmente para os países africanos, nomeadamente por ter recursos renováveis que podem ser aproveitados a partir do momento onde se fará a transferência de tecnologia e a capacitação interno-humana para fazer esse desenvolvimento. Eu não vejo em nada um obstáculo para o desenvolvimento sustentável a questão da transição energética.
If I may, just to complement, I fully agree with what has been said. Perhaps two ideas to bring on the table. First of all, you mentioned, I think it was Melissa, on the access. So we still have in Africa the issue of access to energy services. And this gives ample opportunity for leapfrogging and learning from other experiences, including from the EU. So leapfrogging potential is huge there. As Henri said, there are huge renewable resources. And there is one other thing, we have to think in terms of decentralization. So all these, I mean, can be put in practice in Africa, and I think in a cost-effective way, if I may. Linked to that, has been said already by also Xavier, is the industrial opportunity. So I mean, you cannot give this idea that we are just dumping our technology and exporting our technology, but also to give the opportunity for this technology to be manufactured, so the industrial opportunities. And then one last aspect that I would like to bring on the table is the concept of fair and just transition, that we are also taking care in Europe, because this transition has different costs depending on the region where we are. Look at in Europe, we have the coal regions, that we would like them to transit to a more sustainable energy paradigm. And of course, but this needs to be fair and just for the people. So to find, as the example that Melissa gave with the closure of the coal power plants in Portugal and the reconversion of the people so that no jobs could be lost. So all of these are concepts we are working in Europe, and that I believe would be also be relevant for our partner countries in Africa.
Thank you. And perhaps linked to this idea, we could talk a bit about the public acceptance of renewables deployment. This is to say, when we talk about renewables and when we talk about the issues of diminishing the climate change and so forth, and what we see in Portugal and in other societies, there is sometimes the reaction which we can summarize in that slogan, "Not in my backyard." And in that sense, what can we do in terms of creating awareness, putting the pros and cons, but mostly getting public opinion on board in terms of renewables deployment in several European societies, but also even the United States and other societies. So that would be my question to you.
I'm happy to maybe one suggestion. So one thing that's come up in some of the geographies that we work in is the concept of dig once. So I do think that we could be better at coordinating the infrastructure projects around renewables. So if you look at the distribution side, where we will have to be putting in charging networks, and then at the same time, there's going to be a lot of broadband and telecom and 5G. I think there is something around coordinating that, coordinating. If you're going to put in, like in Humber in the UK, where they're doing the feed for CCS, but then they're going to design the hydrogen line at the same time. Just even though actually from a project perspective, it's not that, like the capacity of that hydrogen line and what they're designing is not the project, right? They're building it bigger than they're expecting. They're kind of building it for the future, the design part of it, and looking at how to optimize it, even though there'll be like a level of it that's specific to projects. So thinking bigger from an infrastructure, like minimizing disruption, both on the distribution and the network side, I think is really important, because otherwise people remember if their neighborhoods are being digged up. So the whole dig once and, integrated energy system planning, integrated energy system thinking is I think a really important thing to like kind of start to minimize the disruption.
I may come in here. Perhaps two important things that should be under consideration. One is how to get the ownership of this public, of the society, and one way of getting to that is to incentivize more self-consumption and renewable energy communities. This is a way to so that the citizens have a real contact with the benefits of these projects and feel the ownership. And the second element is their, involvement from the early stages of the planning of these projects. So more consultation and association of citizens and organization, the local society. I think these are two ways of getting there. Allow me perhaps to mention that, for instance, when it comes to self-consumption, we are at the moment preparing a strategy on to accelerate deployment of solar energy in the European Union, and this will be looking at various things, including on development of new business models, enabling small and medium-sized enterprises and citizens to take advantage of solar PV.
I'd like to follow up on that and to bring public policies into the conversation. The notion that climate change and energy transition is being driven by public policy as its engine. Is it a fair assertion? It's a public policy move towards sustainability that is leading the way, or is there an understanding, a common understanding between public policy and public opinion on the need for sustainable development and energy transition? Is there a combination or a match between public policy and public opinion, or one is pulling the other into this direction? And also, where's the role of science and science-based knowledge on the debate about energy transition and sustainable development? Thank you.
I think that's a difficult question. I don't know if there was first the policy or the opinion. I think that they went a bit together. In a sense, there was a kind of joint development towards a certain sense of need for pushing a direction which is more sustainable. I think one additional element that plays a crucial role now is that companies, corporates are also definitely looking into climate change and sustainability for themselves, no? Because the financing and the shareholders in general, their clients, their own employees are asking for that. So it's not just a matter that stands on the public domain and public discussion, but also something that is inner in the visions and the strategy of the companies. Boards are paid also based on the achievement of certain KPIs based on sustainability. So there is something which is, definitely changed in the last year and is pushing into that direction. So honestly, I don't know what starts first, but definitely something that is moving in the same direction.
And I think building on Xavier's point, I do think it was in the last year. Like, I feel like in the last, COP26, and actually since COP26, the voice of the corporates and the financiers and the general public has gotten a lot louder, exponentially louder than it was in previous years. Probably if I had to choose from 12 months ago, I would have said policy was pulling and the average person and even most companies were following. And we're really doing it from a reporting and kind of hygiene factor. But I think that really has turned since COP and in the last few months, where now we are expecting the private sector to be driving this. And we are expecting, GFANs, the 450 or so banks and insurance and et cetera, with their 130 trillion, et cetera, to be pushing this more and more, and that the private sector, supported by the public, would be taking a much more visible role than they had in the past. But it is really this year, this last year.
Bon, penso que a questão da opinião pública versus políticas públicas nas nossas democracias é ainda mais complicado, porque a política neste sector, num país determinado, vai ser muito dependente de quem conduz a política. Temos o caso flagrante do que aconteceu nos Estados Unidos nos últimos 8 anos, onde realmente pode haver um abismo entre a posição de uma política pública e a outra, porque lembro, nos Estados Unidos foi até quase o negacionismo da questão da mudança climática, com a presidência Trump. Temos um outro bom exemplo em França também, onde não há uma opinião política e não há uma opinião pública. Em França, por exemplo, pode ser o país da Europa onde a opinião pública é mais dividida em relação às opções a tomar, que dá este debate muito francês entre a questão da energia nuclear e a questão das energias renováveis. Por isso, penso que esta questão é, como foi dito, no responder, sobretudo nas nossas democracias, se eu posso falar assim.
If I may just one last comment here, I think it's a combination. You cannot say. I agree with Melissa that perhaps much more in the past it was policy driven. But I think is a combination. I mean, they serve different. They're complementary. I mean, public policies to set the direction and create the enabling conditions, notably legal framework conditions for investments that have to be mostly private. This cannot be paid by public money. So it's really the public policies to give the direction and set the conditions for the private investment to come. And as it was already said by the other speakers, surely we see a much stronger interest coming up from corporates, either because of the image, but I would say a lot because it makes sense in economic terms. And the same goes to the private citizen. It's very convenient. Make some calculations also with some useful subsidies that you get. It's very convenient to have your own PV panels at home. So I think it's the economics is playing a big role here, but they are absolutely complementary. You could not have one without the other.
On your question about science, you asked the role of science. I think there's like probably two really important like content points is science and financing that just need to be much more well understood by a lot of the different stakeholders across the value chain, just because of the timing that we have. So we have this decade, and in this decade, we're supposed to do a lot, right? I mean, it took, for those of you who don't remember, 30 years for the LNG and the biofuels international markets to develop, right? And then in 10 years, we're supposed to be like, hydrogen's ready to go, like in 10 years. And so, you know, there's a lot that's supposed to happen in this decade. And so both the science side and I think the financing side have to come together with like the policy and the business side. I was in a workshop last Wednesday, and it was with like 100 people that are looking at the IIJA funding. So either they're like 20 people from the DOE that are giving away the money, or the people like 80 people that are going to apply for the money, right? And the question was, what creative financing mechanisms will effectively mobilize $100 of private investment for every $1 of IIJA money? So instead of like you have $8 billion to go to 4 hydrogen hubs, you actually want to create an $800 billion industry, right? Not just an 8 billion, you have 4 hubs. And so everybody coming together from literally the science side to the finance side to the corporate and operational and the asset and the off-takers to just understand this problem and like look at the incentives across the value chain for this to actually happen. And instead of letting it naturally happen, because it will naturally happen, but it would take 20 years, try to figure out how to make it happen in like 10 years instead of like 30 years or 20 years. Isn't that easy? And so the role of science is to make our big issues much more digestible and like to help us problem solve with like digital and all the other things. But I think the financing and the risk side needs to be also as well understood as the science side, because that just has to come with a level of certainty so that people will put money in, because then there's like a lead time after the money comes in before the assets are built.
I have a follow-up on what Melissa just said. There's a comment that came from the Zoom, from people watching us at home. One of our listeners asks if, at the end of the day, when we reach climate sustainability, the cost for the user, for citizens, for you and I at our homes, will it be less, more, the same as we expect, if not considering other impacts of non-sustainable development, but the cost for the final user, the families, will it be less, same, or more in a renewable energy world?
Questão difícil de responder, porque quando falamos do custo para o utilizador final hoje da energia que consome, será que o consumidor paga o custo todo, como foi dito, uma parte dos custos do sistema energético, nomeadamente dos custos ambientais, que neste momento são suportados não pelos consumidores, mas essencialmente pelos taxpayers, at the end of the day. Responder à sua pergunta é complicada, porque é a questão, por exemplo, que houve em França, quando o governo francês teve que recuar por causa de manifestações gigantes relativamente à taxa sobre os combustíveis. O consumidor final, e sobretudo os consumidores, digamos, menos favorecidos em termos econômicos, sentiram isso como o aumento exagerado para ele do preço da energia. E, factualmente, era verdade. No entanto, o facto de aumentar o preço ao consumidor, que pode ser uma consequência, não tenho a certeza, porque quero lembrar, apesar de tudo, que hoje, nomeadamente a energia solar e a energia eólica para novos projetos, os custos de produção por megawatt-hora são mais baixos que todos os outros custos de produção fósseis, quer nuclear. Então, penso que não devemos ter na ideia que, por ter mais renovável, o que a transição energética terá que sair mais cara ao consumidor. Mas, sendo isto dito, também a complexidade suplementar, repito, que hoje em dia os consumidores não pagam a totalidade do custo real desta energia que recebem.
I mean, we have to pay for resiliency and security, right? I mean, those things are not free and we pay for them today. So I think that's the biggest challenge, is us understanding, like, you know, we talk a lot about flexibility, but I think I worry more about resiliency and security of the whole system, because we will have more and more weather events and our systems need to bounce back from those weather events really, really quickly. Otherwise, we have, you know, like what happened at ERCOT, right? And those kinds of things where you're not ready, like your awesome flexible system, but actually the resiliency side, a 1 in 20-year event is now a 1 in 5-year event. So how are you preparing for that? That becomes more difficult. So I think, to Henri's point, it's like really the total cost that you have to compare. So we hope, and we're planning, that in a 1.5 degree scenario, we will be able to manage fewer weather events. Because when there's a weather event, like if you had a lot of those, then actually the total cost to society is obviously super, super significant. You know, COVID and health, right? If you were living next to a coal plant, then you were disproportionately hit by how bad the COVID was because of the respiratory issues that come with that. How is that priced in as an externality as well? So I think we have to look at it holistically. It's like a super, super hard question. We still have to solve for trying to be lowest cost. So we have to make, you know, logical compromises. And these are technologies that will get more and more competitive over time. So, you know, we hope that, but I think that the number that is a very difficult one to put a number on is the resiliency and security number. And, you know, what would be the cost of that if we didn't do anything?
Yeah, and also the cost of technology. I mean, the more we will invest in those technologies, the more the cost will reduce. I mean, we have seen for renewables, I mean, we will see more renewables and also others. I mean, hydrogen, of course, I mean, you talk about, I mean, the cost will decrease $1, $2. I mean, those numbers, so $1 is 25 euros per megawatt hour, more or less, no? So which is, I mean, compared to the gas price we have today, I mean, probably is 1/4, no? So I mean that's the type of evolution that we should expect. So it's a matter of investing in the right places to get the cost down and find a way which is sustainable. Then if we add up on top what Melissa said and Henri as well, I mean the social cost of the the for example, of the CO2 and all the emissions, but also the implication of those. Of course, there is a balance which is positive for a clean development. So I think that's one of the elements why I think it's the way to approach it. So it's a way that is not just looking at the cost of today, but we will need definitely to look at the cost and the evolution of the cost for the next years.
And we need a solution for methane, right? I mean, Xavier knows I'm big biogas fan but I mean, we have emissions that we have to actually capture and do something with, right? We have methane in agriculture that we need to capture and do something with. We have landfills we have to do something with. We have wastewater. Like, we have, from a circularity and waste point of view, we need to do something with that. We can't just let it go into the atmosphere. So I think there's some of those things that are, maybe we got away with not doing anything before, but not doing anything isn't really an option, you know? So capturing it and putting it to productive use has got to be good.
In the EU, we are regulating methane emissions from energy. Okay, there is a proposal on the table now being discussed by the member states.
Yeah, we should at least do have that conversation with the public opinion. What is the true cost of not doing energy transition and sustainability? What do we actually pay in direct costs plus taxes plus mitigation plus all of that should be included in a conversation, an open conversation with public opinion in different countries. If we want to take this transition or carry the public opinion within the transition, as Melissa said, we are in the right place to do it now after COP26, and the way that public opinion has wake up to the situation. So, but we should be fair and square, and make the full case of what it means and what it costs and what not transition costs at the end of the day. I would like to open for the floor for questions. If we have at least two here in the room, and we'll check also
the concept of economic growth bothers me a lot. In all of these world forums, people keep talking about economic growth in a world that we all know is of finite resources. So how do you see this progressing? Maybe the concept of economic growth could be transformed into prosperity, because as a stakeholder, normal public, that's what I care about, prosperity. And economic growth is for shareholders, which is the smallest part of the population. That connects to another part of the question, that is, Melissa mentioned that in Indonesia, the carbon footprint is much smaller than in the UK and the US. And how can Indonesia leapfrog and not have the carbon footprint that we have in the West? Is it discussed on how to reduce the carbon footprint of the West? Is it recognized that we are an extremely, extremely wasteful society? I mean, go to Texas, all you see are SUVs and trucks. Nobody drives a regular small car, even though most of those trucks don't even see a drop of mud in their entire lives. So how are these forums dealing with over-consumerism, with wastefulness, which ties to the prosperity aspect?
Another super hard question. Basically, a data point to back up your point, you know, in the US, 2/3 of the energy produced doesn't actually make its way into consumption. And I think a data point that I had on the amount of like the conversion that I think Xavier mentioned this too, in transportation in the US, so your SUVs, it takes 5 quads of energy for transportation in the US, but it takes 24 quads, mostly petroleum, to supply that energy. And then if you move to electric engines, it actually could be down to 6 quads. Of course, like not everything could move to electric engines, but just to give you an idea of how much energy is wasted, 2/3 of the energy produced is actually rejected in the form of waste heat. So there is a lot of waste in the system. So I think Paula already mentioned this. Efficiency should be at the top. Efficiency should be at the top because we do waste a lot in our system. Waste heat, we could totally put waste heat to productive use. In clusters, someone else's waste heat is somebody else's district heating, right? So I think we can definitely do more with efficiency overall, and we can be better at that. And certainly on the consumption side, I think you pointed on something that is probably one of the most important things, if not the most important thing in this energy transition, is how demand reacts. So we absolutely need the demand side to take as much responsibility for the energy transition as the supply side, right? So we have historically dispatched to demand. That can't be the way we do it going forward. Like demand, and Paula was talking about self-consumption, like we need demand to be optimized. We need, Google talks about 24/7 carbon free, where they're following the wind and the sun. We need to be applying that in more places. And people need to be conscious of like per capita CO2 and conscious of like how much they're individually consuming. So, on the growth market side, they would say, how come there's not a per capita CO2 tax or something like that, right? So I think there's definitely a lot in what you've said, and a lot of the reasons that maybe we haven't talked about it so much is because it's the West that doesn't look so great on that metric, but it's really important, and I think there is a lot of awareness that the demand side has to be different, and we have to do something with the systemic efficiency of the entire system too.
If I may just support Melissa here and bringing one of the key pillars of the European Green Deal, which is the circular economy. That is also applied in the energy sector and in our proposals. Melissa gave an example, the waste heat from data centers, but there are many others. So really this concept of circularity, so that nothing is wasted. It's something that is very present in our policy.
Good afternoon to all speakers. I was thinking how to put the question. When I was at secondary school, my teachers told me that oil, gas, and coal, they didn't call them fossil fuels, they call them hydrocarbons, meaning that they are composed of hydrogen and carbon. My question for you is the following. Speaking about energy transition and not putting in question that these 3 hydrocarbons are not renewable and they have the consequences of polluting with CO2 and all the consequences of that. My question is the following. If a technology is economically possible to develop that captures or extracts hydrogen from carbon, oil, and gas without burning them, shouldn't we consider this a good possibility for the next years and for the energy transition? Or do you believe that this technology does not exist and cannot exist? Thank you.
I think we should consider everything. I mean, we are really not in a position to be that choosy on stuff. Like, I definitely think carbon from the environment, we have to, even trying to capture CO2 from the environment is something that we have to consider. I mean, I was even in a solar geoengineering National Science Foundation situation, like call to even look at pretty much everything. Not that I would want sulfur to be put into the environment or anything like that, but I mean, I do think we're in a situation where we can't really be that choosy. I mean, we're running up to a pretty tough deadline of like, we'll know in the next 5 years or even the next 7 years whether we're going to hit 2030. If we don't hit 2030, there's no way we're going to hit 2050. So I mean, I think we need to look at all of the different technologies.
Of course, we have to look at the economics.
Mm-hmm.
Really makes sense also from an economic point of view, and look at all the life cycle. Not just at the end. I think it's important to factor in all this.
Yeah.
Of course.
Yeah.
Thank you all. Thank you to our distinguished speakers, the public online and in here with us. Thank you so much for a lively conversation, an enlightening conversation. And for all of us, we reconvene tomorrow at 9 o'clock here in the same room. So see you all tomorrow, and thank you once again. Thank you.